More American troops are headed to Afghanistan to help U.S. citizens get out after the Taliban took over Afghanistan's capital.
After 20 years of war, the U.S. is evacuating its embassy there, with many comparing it to the 1975 fall of Saigon in the Vietnam War. Here's Richard Engel with more.
The Kabul airport is the only safe way out of Afghanistan, and today there was nearly a run on it. Afghans who could get visas rushed to foreign countries. For the United States, the airport is the staging ground to evacuate U.S. embassy personnel. Helicopters and airplanes circled over Kabul, shuttling between the embassy, where sensitive documents were burned, and the airport as the Taliban closed in. The militants had already taken every city except Kabul, mostly without fighting. U.S. trained and equipped Afghan soldiers just melted away. By early afternoon, the Taliban's advance got even stronger. They broke into Kabul's main jail, freed thousands of prisoners, and instantly added them to their ranks. Afghans saw what was coming. The American evacuation does not apply to the vast majority of Afghan citizens. I went to an office in a shopping mall packed with Afghans struggling to fill out the State Department's webpage for visa requests. Most people here worked for the U.S. military in minor roles, like cooks, cleaners, and guards. Afghans swarmed around me, thinking that as an American, perhaps I could help. They showed me documents proving their employment history.
So everyone showed up with their ID cards, pictures of their phone, other IDs, recommendation letters, employment contracts, and they're hoping that all this paperwork will be enough to get them a visa immediately so they can get out of this country.
Others came here because they're terrified of the Taliban and didn't know where else to go.
She doesn't have any connection to the U.S. She's just here out of desperation. She's saying, please, do something. Take my son.
They were right to be worried. By late afternoon, the Taliban made a brief incursion into Kabul, probing. They met no resistance. Kabul would be a walkover. Just hours later, seeing the writing on the wall and likely saving his life, President Ashraf Ghani escaped the country. It was game over.
Kabul is falling now. We've just left our office, our longtime home in Afghanistan, and we're heading to a safer location, what we hope will be a safer location. Already we've seen some gunmen who look like Taliban on the streets, and all of the government checkpoints, all the police, all the soldiers, they're gone.
It was done. After 20 years, the Taliban took Kabul and Afghanistan almost effortlessly. By nightfall, the Taliban seized the presidential palace. Al Jazeera broadcast pictures of them inside Afghanistan's equivalent of the Oval Office, while the United States scrambled to evacuate, an inglorious end to a 20-year war.
Oregon Congressman Earl Blumenauer helped create the Iraqi and Afghan immigrant visa programs for people who help U.S. forces. He says the U.S. must act now to evacuate Afghan allies who put their lives on the line to help our country, going on to say now is the time to save lives. The Today Show will have much more on this coming up at 7 o'clock.
All right, let's get to some of this morning's top COVID headlines now with our 3 Things to Know segment. Here we go. Number 1 this morning. Starting today, Legacy Health is limiting the amount of visitors at their facility. So Legacy says an increasing number of staff and patients have been exposed to COVID since the rapid rise of the Delta variant began. Patients can no longer bring a visitor with them unless it's an emergency. Legacy says there are a few other exceptions, but people need to contact Legacy ahead of time to make arrangements. Number 2, the Watershed Music Festival in Washington has been linked to more than 160 COVID cases in several different counties. It's a 3-day music festival, country music festival, that happens out in the gorge every year. Health officials traced cases back to 11 different counties and also reported one in Oregon. The festival website recommended that people get vaccinated before the festival and also wear a mask during the event, but those things were not required. And number 3 this morning, just a few weeks after its first ship left port, Carnival Cruise Lines is also dealing with an outbreak. 27 people have tested positive for COVID, most of them staff members, and all of them were vaccinated.
Well, unfortunately, from the executives I've spoken to over the last few weeks in the cruise industry, it's unrealistic to think that every ship will be 100% COVID-free. It's just really tough. As we've seen, even on a cruise ship where they require the vaccine, still there have been scenarios where people have tested positive for COVID-19.
So this is a developing story. The Today Show will have much more on it later today, including safety precautions that other cruise lines are now taking. And those are 3 things to know about COVID this morning.
The Portland Timbers play their first match this weekend since the statewide mask mandate. And in Providence Park, every fan over 5 has to wear a mask in the concourse and walking around in the aisles, but not when they're sitting down, which might sound weird because if you've ever been in any stadium, you know those seats are packed in shoulder to shoulder sometimes. Plus, you're yelling, you're eating, you're drinking. And those rules have made some people uneasy about going to games at all.
We yell, we scream, we chant, we sing. We're very vocal when we're there. So there's a lot of particles flying around in the air, and some of them are going to be filled with that variant. It would be nice to show proof of vaccination, but if everyone wore a mask, that would be a simple answer to helping stop the spread.
So to make a statement, instead of selling her ticket, Victoria left her seat empty. So weigh in. Should masks be required in your seat at outdoor sporting events in Oregon? So far, most of you are saying yes. 67% of you voting that way on our KGW Sunrise Twitter page, where the poll is at the top. You can also text us your thoughts. The number for that is 503-226-5088. We'll check in on the poll throughout the morning. All right, high school athletes in Oregon can begin practicing for the fall season today. This is for football, volleyball, cross country, soccer, and cheerleading. There are no plans for shorter schedules in any sport across the state.
All right, one more local headline before we get back to today's forecast. It involves 3 large wildfires in Oregon that are all now 100% contained. In a tweet, the Oregon Forest Service says that update includes the Bootleg Fire in southern Oregon, which we know burned more than 413,000 acres over the course of nearly 40 days. The Forest Service in that same tweet also thanked the hundreds of firefighters who worked incredibly long hours to put that fire out.